London, 1847. A city of nearly 2 million souls inhales coal smoke instead of air. More than 20,000 chimneys exhale black clouds every dawn, painting the morning grey before the sun can rise. The River Thames lies half frozen. Barges are trapped in sheets of ice. In the crowded alleys of Whitechapel, the poor feed their fires with whatever will burn: broken furniture, torn crates, even scraps of cloth. Doctors call this season the Great Fog. Others whisper the Black Winter. At its height, sulphur thickens the air until day feels like dusk and breathing feels like drowning. During that month, temperatures fall below 10 degrees Celsius. Milk freezes in bottles. Ink hardens in the nibs of clerks who keep writing until the metal snaps. City records count hundreds dead from exposure each week. The Times reports with cruel brevity, 200 bodies found in open streets this morning. When dawn breaks, the sun glows the colour of rust through a haze so dense that even the clock face of St. Paul's dissolves from view. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive, and I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now, together, we at Tull slip into the journey. And this is where you stand now. You push open the warped door of a narrow tenement off Commercial Street. The cold hits like a slap. The alley outside has vanished into a yellow-grey wall. You hear only hooves striking cobblestone and the faint, uncertain toll of a bell somewhere deep in the mist. The air tastes of sulphur, cabbage water, and rusted metal, as if the whole city has begun to corrode. You step out, and the fog closes behind you. Moisture beads on your eyelashes. Your breath floats before you, pale and trembling. A lamplighter moves past, his torch barely slicing the gloom. He mutters that even the angels would lose their way tonight. London has turned spectral. From the docks to Hyde Park, visibility shrinks to a few paces. Carriages crawl, drivers shouting to avoid collision. Men lead horses by rope. Women clutch children beneath shawls stiff with frost. Somewhere along the Strand, a cab veers too far and plunges into the Thames. No one finds the bodies until 4. The papers will print a single line. No survivors. You move slowly. The street beneath you is slick, a stew of ice soot and refuse. Every sound is smothered. A broom scraping, a cough, a window closing. Coal dust falls like black snow. You taste it when you breathe. They say the fog creeps indoors, staining curtains and lungs alike. And you've seen it happen. By morning, white linens turn brown. Some hang wet sheets across their windows to filter the air. Others burn vinegar. Nothing helps. London breathes poison and calls it progress. A shape appears ahead. A boy, thin as wire, face streaked with soot. He carries a wicker basket filled with coal chips scavenged from the riverbank. His voice breaks as he offers a handful for a penny. He says his sister froze last night in a stairwell near Spitalfields. He doesn't cry. He only asks if you'll buy. You drop a coin into his palm, and he nods once before vanishing back into the fog, swallowed whole like a spark in smoke. The smell thickens. Tar, horse manure, something faintly sweet from a baker's shuttered oven. Somewhere glass shatters, followed by a chorus of startled hooves. 2 carriages collide, drivers shouting, wheels grinding. Men stumble through the mist, guiding animals upright. For a heartbeat there's laughter, that brittle, nervous laughter people use to prove they're still alive. Then coughing, and silence again. The city swallows its noise. Down toward the river. The fog grows colder. Your boots slip on cobblestones glazed with ice. The Thames has become a sluggish vein of grey, its edges sealed with jagged white. Barges lie stranded, ropes frozen like iron rods. You lean against the parapet and listen. Beneath the ice the water groans, deep and animal. Even the river sounds tired. The ferryman's lantern flickers somewhere beyond, a faint orange bead in the dark, then disappears. Historians will later call this winter, one of the most polluted on record. Analysts will calculate that sulfur dioxide levels rose 40 times higher than clean air allows. Letters will tell of funerals outnumbering weddings, of grave diggers warming their hands over lanterns before returning to frozen earth. But none of those numbers mean anything to you now. What matters is the breath in your chest, heavy, visible, tasting of smoke and iron. You turn back into the labyrinth of streets. Behind the frosted windows of a butcher's shop, sides of meat hang stiff as marble. Next door, a baker scrapes soot from loaves baked too close to the chimney. Life continues, blurred at the edges. From the upper windows of wealthy homes, firelight glows, soft orange against black frost. Somewhere, a piano plays a hesitant waltz. Inside, they sip tea and complain about the draft. Outside, a woman burns her last chair leg for warmth. You pause beneath a gas lamp. The glass rattles. The flame trembles like a heartbeat. For a breath, the fog thins. You see a woman crossing the street. A child clutched to her chest, their figures golden in the flicker. Then the haze folds around them again. Only the echo of footsteps remains. Up the hill, the bells of St. Mary Le Beau toll 9, or maybe 10. The hours blur. Time moves differently in this fog, slowed by cold and fear. You imagine the city itself asleep, dreaming through its own breath. Perhaps beneath the soot and frost it imagines being clean again. The thought warms you more than the coal in your pocket. A gust of wind coils through the alley, stirring the mist into motion. Shadows shift, chimneys, spires, silhouettes of men hauling sacks of ice. Somewhere a train whistles, distant and lonely, its cry bending through the murk. For an instant the fog lifts just enough to reveal the faint silver of the river, and the outline of bridges stretching like frozen ribs across the city. London exhales, trembling, alive in its suffering. Then, just as suddenly, the curtain falls again. The sound dulls, the light fades, and you're left standing in the thick breath of a city that refuses to stop breathing. You close your eyes and listen. To the muffled bells, the hiss of gaslight, the slow rhythm of your own pulse matching theirs. Somewhere out there, beyond the fog, spring still exists. But for now, London sleeps in its own shadow, and you stand within it, part of its dream. It begins, as always, with the sound of shovels. Long before dawn, you hear them. Iron blades striking cobblestone, scraping ash from the street corners of Whitechapel. The city is still half asleep, but its lungs already exhale smoke. Every household fights the same war each winter, the war for fire. Coal is the currency of survival now, more valuable than bread, heavier than gold. London runs on it, burns it, breathes it, chokes on it. By the 1840s, the city consumes nearly 5 million tons a year, shipped down the River Tyne and unloaded along the Thames in black mountains that never melt. Entire fortunes rise and fall on the price of coal. When supply falters, death follows close behind. You step into the street, breath sharp as needles. Vendors are already shouting, their cries muffled by fog. Coal! Best Wallsend! Penny a scuttle! Their barrows are small, their sacks smaller. They sell warmth by the handful, measured out in soot-stained palms. You see a mother haggling, her hands bare and red. She offers half a loaf of bread for a scoop of black dust. The man hesitates, then nods, a trade of desperation for desperation. The rich never see these exchanges. They order their fuel by the ton delivered to cellar doors in Belgravia and Mayfair. Coalmen stack it in heaps as tall as a man. Inside, the fires roar behind carved marble grates. The glow spills across velvet curtains, turning frost on the windows into glittering lace. Servants move from room to room feeding the flames, making sure no guest ever feels a draught. But here, in the slums, the war is fought with scraps. When the price of coal climbs, the poor turn to scavenging. You join a line of figures moving toward the river, silhouettes with buckets and sacks, searching for stray lumps fallen from barges. They call themselves mudlarks, a name worn like armour. At low tide they wade into the freezing shallows, the water biting through rags and shoes. One finds a half-burnt log, another pries coal from the mud with bare hands, fingers blue and trembling. The stench is overwhelming. Rot, sewage, tar, ice floats like broken glass across the water. Somewhere upstream, a barge horn moans. The boy beside you, no more than 10, laughs when his foot sinks knee-deep. "Better than freezing, ain't it?" he says. His teeth are grey. You smile because there's nothing else to do. By afternoon, smoke already blankets the rooftops. From above, London looks aflame, not with fire, but with its own breath. Historians will later call this the age of coal. Every hearth, every factory, every steam engine exhaling together until the sky itself turns black. They'll calculate that an average household burns more than a ton each year. For the poor, that might as well be the weight of eternity. You walk through a market off Bishopsgate. Women crouch beside baskets of cinders, selling fragments too small for stoves, but enough for a few hours of warmth. Children pick through ash heaps for half-burnt embers. One girl carries a bundle wrapped in cloth, rags soaked in oil, sold as poor man's firelighters. Her fingertips are raw from the cold. She hums under her breath, maybe to keep her lips from cracking. The smell of burning wood drifts from an alley. You follow it and find a group huddled around a small fire built from broken crates. The flame shivers in the wind, spitting sparks that vanish into the mist. Someone throws on a fragment of chair leg. Someone else adds pages torn from a ledger. The ink blisters and curls. They hold out their hands as though to a god that might yet forgive them. You remember what the newspapers said last week? 5 found dead in Stepney, all huddled near an extinguished fire. The police called it asphyxiation. Everyone else called it what it was: exhaustion. They burned everything but couldn't outlast the cold. Inside a nearby house, you glimpse the same struggle. A woman kneels by the hearth, coaxing life into the embers. The fire is little more than a faint orange pulse. She feeds it a scrap of paper, then a torn piece of cloth, then something wooden, the leg of a chair perhaps. Her children watch in silence, faces pale in the glow. She whispers to the flame, as though it might answer. For the poor, every scuttle of coal is a decision. Heat or food, comfort or survival. Some light fires only at night when frost becomes unbearable. Others cook by day and shiver till morning. The few who still work in factories come home smelling of smoke but unable to afford it themselves. They carry the scent of warmth without the substance. The fog thickens again by dusk. You feel it in your lungs, thick as syrup. Smoke from thousands of hearths merges with the damp until air becomes visible. A grey ocean you must wade through. Somewhere overhead, a church bell tolls 5 times. The sound drips like melting ice. You stop beneath a bridge where several men crouch around a brazier made from a tin barrel. The light flickers over their faces, pale, cracked, exhausted. One passes a bottle of gin, another adds a piece of rope to the flame. The smell is acrid, but no one complains. A man with a missing glove recites quietly, "Better burned rope than frozen skin." They laugh, and the laughter fogs the air white. There are stories whispered even now of fires so desperate that whole tenements caught alight, accidents born from hunger for heat. In 1847 alone, the fire brigades of London record nearly 2,000 domestic blazes. Most begin with overturned candles or overfed stoves. Most end in ash. And yet, no one stops burning. To live here is to gamble daily with flame. You move toward Fleet Street, where the contrast sharpens. In the windows of gentlemen's clubs, fires blaze behind thick glass. Men in waistcoats drink brandy, their laughter muffled by distance. A footman tosses another log into a grate, so large it could fit a coffin. Through the fog their warmth looks like sunlight. You feel its glow for a second before the mist swallows it. A memory surfaces. A story from last winter. A coal merchant's barge capsized near Blackfriars, spilling tons of fuel into the river. Within hours, hundreds rushed to the banks, wading through ice to claim it. Police reported 3 drowned and dozens frostbitten. But in the weeks after, the same families survived when others didn't. In this city, mercy comes disguised as tragedy. You pass a wall blackened by years of smoke. The brick crumbles beneath your touch, leaving soot on your fingertips. London itself seems made of coal, a vast furnace disguised as a city. You wonder what the sky must have looked like before progress darkened it. Evening falls without ever becoming truly dark. The air itself glows dull orange from the thousands of fires still burning. Chimneys belch smoke that drifts low, curling between rooftops like slow, heavy clouds. It smells of survival, foul, dense, strangely comforting. Inside your chest the cold still lingers, but your blood feels warmer now. Every breath tastes of iron and ember. You think of all those unseen rooms, of mothers striking flint over dry hands, of children blowing softly over coals until they spark, of men counting shillings to decide if tomorrow will have a flame. This is the war for fire. No banners, no glory, only the endless rhythm of shovels and lungs, of matches and frost, of life measured by how long a flame can be kept alive. And as the fog thickens once more, you feel the faint warmth of a hearth behind some distant wall. It's enough to remind you that not every battle ends in defeat. Sometimes survival itself is the victory. Morning comes quietly, though the sun never truly rises. The fog still clings to the city like a second skin. You wake to the faint crackle of footsteps outside, light, quick, urgent. The sound of small boots or perhaps bare feet striking the frozen ground. You draw the curtain aside and glimpse the children of London, already at work before the first bell. They move through the mist like shadows in miniature. Some carry baskets of matches. Others drag sacks nearly as large as themselves, filled with scraps of coal or bones. Their breath fogs the air, small ghosts among the larger one that is the city. In winter, childhood has no meaning here, only hunger, work, and the thin promise of surviving another day. You step outside, your boots sinking into a crust of ice and soot. The lane smells of smoke and salt, of old bread and wet rags. The first voice you hear is a girl's thin, hoarse, calling, matches, warm matches. Her shawl is little more than gauze. She can't be older than 8. Frost gathers on her lashes, and when she blinks it shatters like glass. Historians will later estimate that nearly 1/3 of working-class children in Victorian London were employed before the age of 12. Factories, laundries, street corners. Every frozen alley had its share of tiny labourers. They earned pennies, sometimes nothing at all, their wages devoured by rent and hunger. Winter did not excuse them. It only made their work harder. You follow the match girl as she walks barefoot through slush, her basket of boxes clattering against her hip. She pauses beside a baker's window, fogging the glass as she stares at loaves she'll never taste. The baker looks up, frowns and draws the curtain. The girl moves on. Somewhere behind her, a boy shouts, "Paper! Morning paper!" His voice cracks halfway through the word. By the docks, children cluster around barrels of fire. These are the mudlarks, the scavengers of the Thames. At low tide, they comb the riverbank for bits of rope, metal or coal dropped from barges. Some work barefoot, their toes black with cold and silt. The river is their livelihood and their enemy, freezing, foul and hungry. More than one has vanished beneath the surface, taken silently by the current. The city records their deaths as accidents, though everyone knows it's just another word for poverty. You kneel beside a boy no taller than your chest. His hands are wrapped in rags, his fingernails blue. He shows you what he's found: a bent spoon, a handful of nails and a lump of coal. His smile is cracked but genuine. He says it will keep his mother's fire alive for another night. He doesn't notice the blood where the rope has rubbed his wrist raw. Further inland, the streets swarm with other kinds of work. Young boys in tattered caps sweep crossings, clearing slush for the boots of the wealthy. They bow and scrape as carriages roll past, their faces splattered with mud. For each gesture of respect, they might earn a copper coin, sometimes a kick instead. A man in a top hat tosses a penny, which vanishes instantly into the scramble of hands. Then come the chimney sweeps, the smallest soldiers in London's dirtiest war. You see one now, crouched beside a doorway, his face hidden under a layer of soot. His body is so slight he could slip between railings. At the master's whistle, he scurries toward a house where smoke curls faintly from the flue. The sweep disappears up the chimney like smoke in reverse. Inside you can hear the sound. Scraping, coughing, a faint scuffle that might be laughter or fear. It's said that children were chosen for this work because they were small enough to climb, their bodies narrow and pliant. Many died of suffocation or fell to their deaths. Parliament will not ban the practice until the 1870s, long after countless little bodies have been buried in soot. When the sweep re-emerges, his eyes are wide and red-rimmed. He wipes his mouth, leaving a smear of black across his cheek. The master tosses him a heel of bread. The boy eats it without looking. His fingers shake, but whether from cold or habit you can't tell. In Clerkenwell, the streets echo with a different rhythm. The clatter of wooden clogs on stone. Girls carry bundles of laundry, larger than their torsos. Laundresses' apprentices. They drag wet linens from steam-filled washhouses, their arms trembling from hours of scrubbing. The water they work in is barely warmer than ice. When they finally emerge, the fog outside feels almost gentle. You pass an alley where children cluster around a horse trough, breaking the thin ice to drink. They share the water with the animals, unbothered by the filth. Hunger has made them indifferent. One girl dips her hand in, then laughs when the cold shocks her skin. The sound is light, unbroken, pure, a spark of joy in the grey. It startles you. For a moment you imagine warmth, a classroom perhaps, chalk dust and coal smoke mingling in the air, children repeating lessons in unison. But most of London's poor will never see a schoolroom. Ragged schools founded by charities teach a few thousand, yet tens of thousands remain outside. The rest learn from the streets, how to beg, how to steal, how to survive. You wander toward Holborn, where the fog thins enough to reveal posters plastered on the walls. Wanted, small hands for factory work. The irony is brutal. Hands small enough to reach between gears, small enough to get caught. Factories run day and night, even in frost. In some, the temperature drops so low that water on the floors freezes. The children there move like ghosts in their own breath. Evening approaches again, though it's impossible to tell by the sky. The gas lamps flicker on, halos trembling in the mist. You follow the match girl one last time. She sold only 2 boxes all day. She stops beneath a lamppost, crouches, and strikes a single match. The flame flares weakly, its light gold against her fingers. For a heartbeat she looks like a saint painted in soot. Then the wind steals the fire. Historians will later note that child mortality in Victorian London reached nearly 1 in 3 before the age of 5. Cold, hunger, disease, the holy trinity of poverty. Yet within those statistics lies something unmeasurable. Endurance. These children walk barefoot across ice, carry loads twice their weight, climb chimneys, clean factories, and still find moments to laugh. You stand beside the lamppost as she strikes another match. Her hands tremble. The small flame catches, dances, dies. Then she tries again. Somewhere behind her, church bells toll 6. Each note seems to echo longer than the one before, fading into fog. You reach into your coat and offer her a coin. She looks up, startled, then smiles. A quick flash of warmth brighter than any fire. For a second her eyes reflect the light, and you realize what keeps this city alive. Not its coal, not its industry, but the stubborn spark that refuses to go out. As you turn away, the fog closes once more, swallowing sound and light alike. The girl's voice follows you faintly through the haze. Matches, warm matches, a lullaby of survival sung into the frozen night. The fog has a sound to it now, a soft hiss like water over coals. You hear it even when the streets are silent, the whisper of the air turning against its own people. You step outside and cough before you've taken 3 breaths. The taste is sharp, metallic, with a bitter edge that settles at the back of your throat. The cold is no longer clean. It's thick with something unseen, something that eats at the lungs. By the winter of 1847, Londoners have begun calling it the killer fog. Newspapers print polite warnings, but the truth spreads faster by word of mouth. People speak of waking in the night to find their rooms filled with yellow smoke. Curtains reek of sulphur, white linens darken to grey. Even indoors there is no escape. The air seeps through cracks and keyholes, carrying death with it. Doctors call it fog fever or winter catarrh. They have no cure. You walk toward the market. The vendors wear scarves tied across their faces. When they speak, their voices sound hollow, swallowed by cloth. The fishmonger's hands are red from cold, his apron speckled with soot. He waves a newspaper at you. The headline reads, "Deaths from pulmonary ailments double in a fortnight." You glance at the numbers. Thousands, each one a body turned blue in bed or on the street, lungs clogged with the city's breath. The smell is everywhere. Tar, smoke, decay. Even the snow, when it falls, turns black before it reaches the ground. Children trace letters in the soot that coats their windowsills. A writer in the Times describes London as a furnace turned inside out. He isn't far from wrong. Every factory, every fireplace feeds the fog. The air itself becomes a slow poison. You pass a line of coughing workers outside a dispensary. Inside, a young doctor leans over a table littered with bottles, laudanum, camphor, vinegar, and something labelled chlorate of potash. He looks exhausted. His sleeves are rolled, his eyes rimmed red. When you enter, he glances up and mutters, "Another one?" You nod, pointing to your chest. He listens with a stethoscope pressed against your ribs, a cold circle of brass. "Congestion," he says, like everyone else. He prescribes a tonic of cod liver oil and rest, though he knows rest is impossible when the very air conspires against you. Behind him, a child wheezes softly, her breath rattling like paper in wind. Her mother fans her with a scrap of cloth soaked in vinegar. "They say it keeps the bad humours away," she whispers. The doctor doesn't answer. He's seen too many humours, too many lungs turned black from soot. In his ledger he records another case. He no longer bothers with names. Outside you pass a row of houses where black flags hang from upper windows, the sign of death within. The undertaker's cart waits in the street, its wheels half buried in slush. He smokes as he works, oblivious to the irony. The bodies are light this time of year. Hunger has thinned them. He loads them gently, speaking to them as though they could still hear. "There you go, love. All done now." Historians will later write that the average life expectancy for the London poor hovered around 32 years. They'll list the causes: bronchitis, pneumonia, tuberculosis. Consumption, as the papers called it, the disease that makes the body eat itself from the inside out. Letters from the time describe entire families coughing in unison, their nights punctuated by the rhythm of choking. In tenement rooms without windows, the air grows thick enough to see. Some say they can watch the breath of the dying hang in place before fading. You walk along the Thames again, where the fog feels heavier. The river moves sluggishly, coated with a film of soot and oil. A barge drifts past, its lanterns dimmed to faint yellow orbs. The boatmen cover their faces with wool scarves. One spits into the water and mutters, "It's the air that's sick, not us." You watch his words dissolve in the mist. On the opposite bank stands a factory, hundreds of chimneys coughing together. The sound is like breathing. slow and monstrous. You can feel the vibration in your chest. Inside, men shovel coal into furnaces that glow red behind iron grates. The heat could melt stone, but the workers shiver. Their lungs ache. Their skin graze. They work because to stop is to starve. A sudden gust of wind clears the fog for a moment, revealing the factory's name painted on the wall, Kammer Basen's Soapworks. The irony stings. A place meant to cleanse the body now blackening the sky. The wind shifts again, and the name disappears. The fog returns thicker than before. By nightfall, the city takes on a strange, sick beauty. Gas lamps turn the haze into liquid gold. Every street glows as if underwater. Couples walk arm in arm, muffled in scarves, pretending the danger isn't real. You overhear one man say, "The smell's not so bad once you're used to it." He coughs as he finishes the sentence. His wife laughs, then coughs too. You pass an apothecary window where bottles of blue and green glass shimmer under lamplight. Inside, the pharmacist grinds powders with weary precision. "People want miracles," he mutters. "There are none." He gestures toward the shelves. "These are comforts, not cures." He sells small vials of ammonia to clear the chest and bottles of brandy labeled as medicine. The city drinks itself well. In the poorer districts, healers go door to door with their own recipes. Onion syrup for coughs, mustard plasters for the chest, boiled vinegar for the throat. Some work, most don't. Faith does what medicine cannot. Churches hold nightly vigils, candles flickering in the haze. Priests preach that the fog is a divine warning, a punishment for sin. The pews are full. The sermons end with coughing. You stop outside a chapel where a choir sings faintly through the walls. The voices are thin, almost fragile. The hymn rises into the air, merges with the fog, and vanishes. For a moment you imagine the city itself praying, a million souls breathing the same poisoned air, asking only to wake up alive tomorrow. Then the bells begin again, tolling over rooftops you can no longer see. Their sound trembles in the heavy air, blurring like ink in water. You close your eyes and count. 9 chimes, 10. Each one feels slower than the last. You think of the doctor's hands, the child's breath, the undertaker's soft voice. You think of all the lungs working in unison, each one straining for the next inhale. The sound becomes rhythm, then heartbeat, then silence. Later you'll read that scientists found the fog held enough acid to corrode iron railings. That sulfur mixed with moisture to create droplets of diluted sulfuric acid, tiny invisible knives slicing the inside of the body. They'll write that mortality soared by thousands each winter. That fog fever was really 1,000 different deaths wearing the same mask. But tonight, no one knows that. They only know the sound of coughing through the walls and the faint whistle of trains fading into the dark. You walk home slowly. The gaslight flickers, turning the street into a tunnel of gold and shadow. The air feels alive, pulsing. You cover your mouth with a cloth, though it helps little. Every breath burns. You glance upward and see nothing but grey. No stars, no moon. Even heaven is smothered tonight. Inside your room, you light a small candle. The flame bends, struggling against the drafts. You watch the smoke curl upward and vanish into the same invisible cloud that fills your lungs. You lie down, listening to the city breathe. Somewhere, a clock ticks faintly. Somewhere else, a voice whispers a prayer. You close your eyes and let the sound of the fog lull you towards sleep. The air hums softly, steady, patient, the silent killer waiting just beyond the light. You hear them before you see them. The soft rhythm of wooden clogs on cobblestones, the low murmur of women's voices carrying through the fog. It is still dark when London's women begin their work. They rise first and sleep last, the keepers of warmth in a city built from cold. Inside one narrow room on Dorset Street, a mother kneels before a dying hearth. The fire is little more than a dull red pulse beneath grey ash. She strikes the flint again and again, until sparks bloom like tiny stars. Her hands are raw with cracked nails. Behind her, two children stir under a pile of patched blankets. The eldest, a boy of 6, coughs in his sleep. She blows softly on the coal until a small flame catches, whispering, "Come on, love, burn." Historians will one day note that in mid-century London, women made up nearly half of the city's working poor. Their labour was invisible. Laundresses, seamstresses, servants, match sellers, street hawkers, the quiet machinery that kept homes, and sometimes entire streets, from collapsing. Winter turned each of these tasks into an ordeal. The laundresses suffer first. You walk past a washhouse where steam spills into the street, ghostly white against the black air. Inside, the women work elbow deep in freezing water, scrubbing shirts stiff with soot. Their arms are mottled red, their skin split open at the knuckles. The steam fogs their faces until sweat and condensation are the same thing. One hums a hymn as she beats a sheet against a board. Another wrings linen so hard her breath comes in sobs. The forewoman watches from the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, counting strokes like prayers. When you step back into the street, the contrast is cruel. Across the way, in a tall house with curtained windows, a servant shakes out feather pillows while her mistress drinks tea by a roaring fire. Even comfort has its servants. Further south, near the Thames, the air smells of bleach and smoke. Women work outdoors here, laundry strung on lines that snap in the wind, the fabric freezing into stiff white banners. They call it London linen, and when it freezes they joke that at least it stands up on its own. Their laughter is brittle, but it keeps them upright. You follow one of them home at dusk. Mary Dawson, 28, widow, 2 children. She earns 6 shillings a week washing other people's clothes. Her room is on the 3rd floor of a tenement, damp and windowless. When she opens the door, a gust of frost follows. The children look up, eyes hollow but bright. Mary empties her pockets, 1 heel of bread, a stub of candle, a handful of coal chips wrapped in newspaper. She kneels and arranges them carefully in the grate, coaxing another small fire into life. Her son watches the flame as if it were a miracle. Her daughter leans against her shoulder and murmurs, "It's warm, Ma." For the moment it is. The city depends on women like Mary, invisible pillars holding up the brittle weight of winter. Each morning they queue at pumps for water that freezes in the bucket before they reach home. They sew by candlelight until wax runs out, then by memory. They barter with one another, a cup of flour for a strip of cloth, a few coals for a handful of tea leaves. Neighbours share walls thin enough to hear every breath, every cough, every whispered lullaby. You pass a corner where flower sellers huddle together, baskets empty. Frost has killed the blooms. Now they sell evergreens and holly sprigs instead. Their fingers are purple, their shawls soaked through. One woman wraps her baby beneath her skirt to keep it from the wind. She rocks gently, humming the tune of Greensleeves, the words long forgotten. The melody drifts into the fog and stays there. A newspaper article from that winter claims that nearly 20,000 women worked the streets as vendors and hawkers. Some sold matches, others pins or ribbons, still others nothing tangible at all. Their voices, their smiles, their company for a night. For many, the line between trade and survival blurred entirely. You see them standing beneath the gas lamps, faces pale, eyes hollow. Their laughter is forced, but it keeps the darkness at bay. One calls to a man passing by. He ignores her. She shrugs and stamps her feet for warmth. In a narrow alley off Fleet Street, you find a workshop lit by a single lantern. Inside, half a dozen seamstresses bend over fabric, needles flashing in rhythm. Their breath fogs the air above their stitches. The youngest hums to keep her hands from shaking. The forewoman checks each seam without looking up. "Faster," she says softly. "We're behind again. For 12 hours' work they'll earn barely enough for supper. But the dresses they make will glitter in drawing rooms, where violins play and laughter echoes against marble walls." By late evening the wind sharpens. You follow its sound towards Spitalfields Market, Stalls stand empty now, only scraps of cloth fluttering from the poles. A woman kneels by a brazier made from an old tin bucket, feeding it with bits of paper. Her face glows in the light. Lined, weary, determined, she offers you roasted chestnuts for a penny apiece. The shells crack in her hands. Steam rises, fragrant and sweet. You buy two, though you aren't hungry. The heat seeps into your palms. She smiles, revealing a missing tooth, and says, "A bit of warmth, love, even if it's borrowed." That phrase stays with you as you walk on. Borrowed warmth. It seems the truest measure of survival here. Fires attended by hands that don't own them. Meals cooked by women who won't eat them. Comfort created by those who'll never feel it. Yet they keep at it, day after day, flame after flame. Historians will later describe Victorian womanhood as divided. The angel in the house and the drudge in the street. But in winter, every woman becomes the same. A guardian of heat. Whether she commands servants or scrubs floors herself, she knows that warmth is the thread that holds her world together. You pass the workhouse gates. Inside, rows of women scrub long corridors under the eyes of overseers. Fires burn low to save coal. Their breath hangs white in the air. One hums a lullaby as she works. The same tune you heard from the flower cellar. Perhaps they learned it from each other, passed along like a shared secret. Even in punishment they sing. The night deepens. The city glows faintly from within, 1,000 fires beating like hearts. You watch smoke drift upward, and wonder how many of those flames are tended by women, how many pairs of hands, cracked and bleeding, keep the great furnace of London alive. In the distance, the bells of St. Martin in the Fields ring the hour. You imagine mothers counting the chimes as they soothe their children to sleep, each note a reminder that morning is 1 hour closer. The wind rattles a loose shutter, and somewhere a window breaks with a soft crash. The sound startles a cry from a baby, then silence again. You find your way back to Mary Dawson's street. Light still flickers behind her curtain. Through the thin glass you see her asleep in a chair, head tilted, one hand resting on the hearth. The fire glows weakly, holding on. Beside it, her children breathe in unison, small chests rising and falling to the rhythm of the flame. You stand there a moment longer, watching the light. The world outside is merciless, but here in this one fragile room, a woman has beaten back the dark for another night. The frost may take the roofs and streets, but it will not cross that thin line of heat she's made. You turn away, the image burning in your mind, a mother, a fire, and a city built on borrowed warmth. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive. And I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? The gates rise from the fog like iron teeth. You stand before them shivering, a scrap of paper clenched in your fist, an admission ticket stamped by the parish clerk. Behind the bars the yard is silent except for the clatter of keys and the cough of the porter. A lantern swings from his hand, its light slicing the mist into trembling ribbons. "Name?" he asks, though you know it hardly matters. Here, names melt into numbers. The workhouse smells of wet stone and boiled grain. Your breath echoes as you step inside. The air is colder than the street. Somewhere deep within, a bell rings 3 times, new inmates arriving. You join the small procession, a mother with 2 children, an old man leaning on a stick, a girl no older than 12 clutching a bundle of clothes. The gate shuts behind you with a hollow clang. The sound feels final. Historians will later record that by the mid-1800s more than 200 parish workhouses dotted London, each a fortress of charity and control. Created under the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834, they were designed not as havens but as deterrents. Life inside was to be less eligible than life outside, a phrase that meant safety offered only through suffering. You're led into a long room lit by tallow candles. Smoke curls upward, fighting for space in the stale air. An overseer with ink-stained cuffs takes your name again, then gestures to a pile of coarse uniforms. Strip. Wash. Change. The water in the tin basin is icy. The soap burns like salt. A matron watches, expressionless. When you finish, she inspects your hair for lice, nods once, and points toward the dormitories. Men, women and children are divided at the door. Families shatter with the turn of a key. The mother ahead of you cries out as her youngest is pulled from her arms. Rules of the house, the matron says. The child's small hand disappears into the crowd, fingers outstretched until the fog swallows them. You swallow too, but nothing goes down. Inside the women's ward, the air tastes of damp linen and fear. Rows of iron beds line the walls, each with a thin grey blanket and a wooden pillow. Windows are cracked open for ventilation, letting in a stream of frozen air that never leaves. Somewhere a woman hums under her breath, a broken tune that sounds almost like prayer. You lie down, but the straw mattress crackles with frost. Every cough in the room sounds like a hammer. A bell rings again. Supper. You follow the others into the dining hall, a cavernous space of stone floors and echoing steps. Wooden bowls wait on the tables, each filled with gruel the colour of ash. Steam rises faintly, carrying the smell of oats and metal. You sit, spoon trembling in your hand. The first mouthful is lukewarm and tastes of smoke. Around you no one speaks. Only spoons scrape against wood. The workhouse diet is precise. 7 ounces of bread, 1 pint of gruel, 2 ounces of cheese, an occasional scrap of meat. Everything is weighed, everything recorded. Overseers walk between tables with notebooks, counting bites as though calories were coins. Conversation is forbidden. So is hope. One woman whispers a joke, and earns a week in the refractory cell for disorderly mirth. You learn quickly that silence is safer than warmth. After supper comes work. Even in winter, labour never stops. The able-bodied pick oakum, frayed ropes pulled apart by bleeding fingers to make ship caulking. Others break stones in the yard, each blow echoing like a heartbeat. The weaker sew sacks, scrub floors or sort rags in unheated rooms. The rule boards nailed to the wall proclaim, idleness is sin. The cold makes every movement slow, but slowing is punished. A woman collapses. The overseer nudges her with his boot until she stands again. Later, in the infirmary, you pass rows of iron cots. The sick lie bundled in rags, their breath turning white in the air. The nurse, herself a pauper, moves between beds with a lantern held close. Keep breathing, she tells an old man whose cough rattles like gravel. It's nearly spring. He doesn't answer. She pulls the blanket over his chest and moves on. Records from the time show that death was a constant companion here. In the winter of 1847, more than 6,000 inmates died in London workhouses. Pneumonia, dysentery, starvation, neglect. Some never even reached the gates. They froze in the queues outside, waiting for a place to open. The workhouse took them all eventually, in life or in leisure. You remember the streets beyond these walls, the fog, the bells, the soft glow of windows you could never reach. In here there is no glow, only the slow burn of hunger and the echo of the matron's steps. Yet, strangely, there is also stillness. No wind, no rain, no fear of the next rent collector. Misery, at least, is predictable. You understand why some called it a refuge. At dawn, frost creeps across the windows, tracing veins of white through the glass. The bell rings again. Work, breakfast, prayer, work. The routine is a kind of heartbeat that no one dares to interrupt. The chaplain reads from the pulpit. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Someone coughs. Someone laughs once and is silent. You stare at the hymn book in your hands and think of the fire you left behind, the small one that had almost gone out. You wonder if it still burns. Outside the gates, London moves on. The markets open, carriages roll, and the rich complain that the fog stains their coats. Inside, the workhouse remains frozen in time, a machine grinding the poor into obedience. Still, small kindnesses survive here. A woman shares her crust of bread with the newcomer who cries at night. Another patches a torn sleeve with a strip from her own dress. These gestures cost almost everything, yet they continue. One evening, the matron orders you to help in the laundry. The water is freezing, the air thick with steam and soap. You scrub until your hands bleed. The woman beside you whispers, "They say if you die here they bury you without a name." She smiles faintly. "Best keep living then." The words feel almost like a joke, and for the first time you laugh, quietly, quickly, before anyone hears. By late February, the cold begins to ease. The fog thins, revealing the yard in weak sunlight. You step outside for the first time in weeks. The air smells faintly of thawing earth. The porter leans on his broom and mutters, "They'll send some of you out soon. Fewer mouths to feed." He doesn't sound cruel, just tired. You look toward the gates and imagine the city beyond. No warmer but free. You're not sure which is worse. That night, lying on your straw mattress, you listen to the rhythmic breathing of the others. Dozens of lungs, in and out, slow and steady. It sounds like the sea, relentless and vast. You close your eyes and picture the firelight of a home that isn't yours, the faces of those still waiting outside the gate. You whisper a promise into the dark when you leave. You'll remember them. You'll remember this place where mercy wore chains. The candle gutters once, then dies. In the dark, you can still feel the warmth of its last flicker against your cheek, proof that even here, even now, something small can still burn. At dawn, the river is silent. No gulls, no splash of oars, only a flat expanse of grey that might be land if you didn't know better. You walk toward the Thames embankment and see it for yourself. The water has turned to stone. The current that once fed London's heart now lies locked beneath a skin of ice. It creaks softly, like wood beneath one's feet. Frost rims the mooring posts in white fur, and the ropes hang stiff as iron bars. The Thames has frozen before. Records tell of it in 1684 and 1739. But no one alive remembers it like this. In 1847, the cold was so deep that barges moored mid-channel, trapped where they stopped. The city's veins are sealed. Coal cannot move, grain cannot land, and ferrymen curse the sky. For London, this is more than spectacle, it is suffocation. You step onto the ice at the edge, cautious, hearing the groan beneath your boots. Boys dart past, daring each other farther out, their laughter sharp as glass. A man in a topcoat follows with a stick, prodding the surface as though it might answer. Near Blackfriars Bridge, a crowd gathers to stare. Someone shouts that the river hasn't looked this solid since the frost fairs of old, when they built taverns and printing stalls upon it, when the rich skated by torchlight. But this year there is no celebration, only fear and hunger. You walk along the bank towards Southwark. The air smells of salt and smoke, colder than breath itself. Traders pace restlessly beside warehouses full of spoiled goods. A dockworker tells you he's been idle for a week. The ice has stolen his wages. When the river stops, he says, "London stops." His beard is crusted with frost. His words fog the air like smoke. In the distance you hear the muffled strike of axes. Men from the Port Authority chip at the ice to clear a channel. The blows echo down the water like slow drums. Each strike splinters a sheet no thicker than a coin, yet hard as stone. They work until their hands bleed, the shards glittering around them like shattered mirrors. The tide pushes back, freezing again before they finish. It is a war of inches, lost daily. You cross the bridge, the planks slippery under a thin crust of frost. From the middle you can see how far the freeze has spread. Barges lie tilted, their hulls caught mid-turn. A dog trots along the ice beside them, fearless, tail high. Its paw prints stay perfect behind it, preserved in rhyme. You glance down through a fissure where dark water moves sluggishly beneath the surface, black and alive. The sound of it, the slow pulse, reminds you that even trapped, the river still breathes. Historians will later calculate that during these weeks, River traffic fell by nearly 90%. The cost of food doubled, coal tripled, thousands of labourers were laid off. Soup kitchens appeared along the docks, run by churches and sailors' widows, but the city could not feed itself on charity. The Thames was its stomach, its artery, its mirror, and now it reflected only sky. On the south bank, children gather near a frozen inlet where the ice is thinner. They throw stones, listening for the crack that means danger. The smallest wears a cap too large for his head. When it slips over his eyes, the others laugh. For a moment their laughter feels like defiance, as if sound itself could warn them. You remember what the papers said last week. 3 youths lost to the river. Ice gave way near Lambeth. The story already forgotten, replaced by the next tragedy. A woman selling roasted chestnuts stands near the bridge, her brazier hissing against the cold. She tells you that the ice swallowed a barge horse this morning. Went down without a sound, she says, like the water was waiting. Her words hang between you. A cloud of steam. You buy a handful of chestnuts, their shells cracking in your palm. The warmth stings. It almost hurts to feel it. Farther along the embankment, soldiers patrol to keep people from venturing too far. Yet every hour someone tries. A fisherman searching for a dropped net. A boy chasing a hat. A woman hoping to cross and save the fare. You watch one attempt it now. A man with a wheelbarrow stacked with coal, inching across. The ice groans. The crowd holds its breath. For a moment he makes it halfway, then vanishes with a single heavy splash. The sound is brief. The silence that follows lasts forever. No one moves. Finally a voice murmurs, "God rest him." The current takes care of the rest. At night, the river becomes a vast mirror. Gaslight trembles across its surface, doubling the city's glow. From the north bank you can see the outlines of St. Paul's and the steeples beyond, their reflections quivering in the ice. Couples walk arm in arm, pausing to stare, as if beauty could excuse the cold. Street musicians set up near the bridgeheads, fiddles squeaking through the damp air. A blind man sings of summers past, fields, warmth, sunlight he can no longer imagine. Coins ring in his tin like raindrops. You find shelter beneath the arches where barge workers huddle around a barrel fire. The flames dance orange against the soot-black walls. One man tells a story of the old frost fairs, tents built on the ice, gingerbread sold, oxen roasted whole. They called it Merry London then, he says. No one calls it that now. He tosses a splinter into the fire. Sparks rise, vanish. Too many mouths, he adds. Not enough heat. The talk drifts to superstition. Some say the frozen river is a curse, punishment for greed. Others claim it's a blessing, killing the cholera that hides in the water. You think of the fog, the smoke, the air that burns the lungs. Curse or blessing, does it matter when both kill just as slow? You climb back to the bridge as midnight approaches. The bells of St. Paul's toll through the fog, each note stretched thin. The sound rolls over the ice like thunder in slow motion. You lean against the rail and feel the tremor through the wood. The city beneath the fog looks asleep. But you know better. Beneath every roof fires flicker. Beneath every fire coal burns, and beneath it all the river waits, patient, ancient, ready to move again. Historians will later record that when the thaw finally came, it arrived in a single violent surge. Ice broke loose in slabs the size of houses, crushing boats, sweeping away piers. Witnesses wrote of a sound like cannon fire as the ice cracked from London Bridge to Greenwich. The flood carried away everything loose enough to move, timbers, barrels, bodies. Then, as quickly as it came, the river settled, brown and swollen, and the city began again. But tonight, the ice still holds. You crouch at the edge and touch its surface. It feels alive, pulsing faintly, humming with the trapped heartbeat of the tide. You press your palm flat and close your eyes. Beneath you, the great artery of London sleeps, dreaming of motion. When you stand, the wind rises. Snow begins again. Fine, soft, endless. It covers footprints, barges, bridges, Everything that still dares to move. The city grows silent except for the slow crack of ice shifting in the dark. Somewhere a church bell rings once, then stops, its echo swallowed by the storm. You turn away from the river, the sound following you up the hill, steady, deep, eternal, the lifeblood of London reminding you that even frozen, it never truly stops flowing. Night comes down thick and yellow, a curtain drawn over the city's wounds. You follow the sound before you see the light. A thrum of fiddles, the thud of boots, laughter that sounds almost like coughing. The fog smells of coal and cheap gin. In the alleys around Holborn and Seven Dials, warmth is something you drink. A painted sign swings above the door of the Dog and Whistle. Its hinges squeal in the wind. Inside, the air changes instantly. Hot, wet, alive, smoke hangs low, sweet, with spilled rum and singed tallow. 100 bodies crowd the narrow room. Dockers, costermongers, factory girls with sleeves rolled to the elbow, soldiers on leave. The floor is sticky with beer. Someone plays a concertina in the corner. Someone else stamps time. When the fiddler hits the high note, the room roars. Gin is a religion here. The historians will write that London drank 40 million gallons of it a year, that every street had a dram shop, that the poor called it the mother's milk. You see the devotion in their eyes. A woman lifts a chipped glass as though it were communion. Her baby sleeps against her chest. Face turned toward the fire, the drink costs 3 pence, half a loaf of bread, but for a moment it makes the world bearable. The tavern ceiling drips condensation. Candles gutter in bottles. 2 men argue over a card game until a chair breaks. Then the fight dissolves into laughter. Arms slung around shoulders. Apology forgotten. The barmaid wipes the counter with a rag so black it only moves the dirt around. She grins when you order gin neat. Best cure for the fog, she says. The glass burns your throat. Sweet at first, then bitter. You understand why they drink it like medicine. Outside again, the cold slaps you clean. The laughter fades behind the door. Across the lane, another sign flickers. The Royal Alhambra Music Hall. You pay a penny to enter. Inside, heat and light explode. Gas lamps blaze along the balconies. Mirrors multiply every flame until the hall gleams like a furnace. The audience is a tapestry of classes. Clerks in frayed collars beside gentlemen in furs, women in shawls beside those in silk, all equal under the noise. On stage, a comedian in grease paint mimics a constable lost in fog. The crowd howls. The jokes bite about hunger, rent, the endless winter. Laughter, here is rebellion. The singer who follows wears a gown that catches every light. Her voice rises like smoke curling through the rafters. She sings of spring that never comes. Couples sway, a man weeps quietly into his pint. For 3 minutes and 16 bars, the city forgets itself. Historians will later say the music hall saved Victorian sanity, a safety valve for the pressure of survival. The songs changed weekly, echoing the headlines. The frozen Thames, the price of coal, the workhouse scandals. In 1847, one broadside sold by the door reads, "O foggy London, how we choke thee." You buy a copy. The ink smudges on your gloves. A child outside hums the tune for pennies, voice thin but steady. You wander east toward Whitechapel. Every few steps another tavern glows through the haze. The Pig and Whistle, the Goose and Gutter, the Hope and Anchor, each is a pocket of defiance against the frost. Inside one, an old sailor tells a story about the Arctic, how he once saw a whale breach through ice like a god. No one believes him, but they listen anyway. In the telling, the room grows warmer. The gin palaces of the West End are another world entirely. You cross into them as into a church. Marble counters, gilt mirrors, chandeliers dripping light. Behind the bar, women in satin pour clear liquor into crystal. The scent is sharp, perfumed with juniper. A gentleman boasts that he spends 10 shillings a night, enough to feed a family for a week. He toasts progress. while outside a beggar warms his hands over a sewer grate. Through the glass, the two worlds stare at each other, reflections blurred by steam. You move on, drawn by sound. Somewhere a piano hammers out a march, somewhere else a street preacher shouts against sin. His voice trembles with zeal. Gin is the devil's frost. He warms you to steal your soul. The drunks laugh, toss him pennies. He pockets them when he thinks no one looks. The night deepens. Snow begins again, soft flakes glowing orange under the gaslight. The city glitters wetly, half beautiful, half ruined. You follow a crowd toward another hall, this one smaller, cheaper, louder. The door swings open on a cloud of smoke and song. A pianist bangs out Rule Britannia with more enthusiasm than skill. The audience stomps the floor until the boards shake. Then the singer appears, a broad-shouldered woman in feathers, her laugh echoing before she speaks. "Cold out there, loves," she cries. "Then let's burn the air ourselves." The room erupts. She sings of chimney sweeps and sweethearts, of frost on eyelashes and hearts that won't freeze. Every chorus ends with a roar. Still alive, still alive. You watch faces in the flicker of lamplight. Miners, maids, clerks, thieves, all grinning, shouting, forgetting. For these few hours the walls hold back despair. The smoke thickens until you can hardly see, but no one minds. Visibility has never been London's luxury. Outside, near midnight, the streets shine with thawing slush. A drunk lies singing in the gutter. Two friends haul him upright, laughing too hard to scold him. A woman offers roasted potatoes from a tin tray, their skins bursting with steam. You buy one and feel the heat through the paper, the simple miracle of something warm held in both hands. The bells of St. Giles ring too. The taverns begin to empty. Doorways become shelters again. Couples stumble into the fog, arm in arm, humming the night, Sepp's refrain. Somewhere behind you a door slams. Somewhere else a window opens, and a voice sings the last line of the song, Still Alive. Later you will read that reformers tried to close the music halls, calling them dens of vice. Yet when they shut one, 3 more opened. People needed sound as much as heat. In these rooms of gin and laughter they rehearsed hope, note by note. Out of that noise came the working songs, the street ballads, even the rhythms of the marches that would later demand better pay and shorter hours. Every cheer was a heartbeat. You walk back through 7 Dials. The fog thickens once more, wrapping you in its familiar embrace. Somewhere a piano still plays, faint and crooked. The tune drifts above the roofs, rising with the smoke. The air smells of gin and ashes. You realize that this too is a kind of fire, not the clean flame of hearths, but a rough, defiant heat, born from voices and drums, from the refusal to be silent. As you turn the last corner toward home, snow begins to fall again, covering footprints, softening edges. The city exhales. For a few heartbeats you could almost believe the laughter still echoing behind you belongs to summer. You pull your coat tighter, and in the hush between 2 distant bells, London seems to murmur to itself, half drunk, half dreaming, still alive. By now the city should have turned to stone. The fog still hangs, the frost still bites, and yet London continues to breathe. The miracle is not in its smoke or engines, but in the small mercies that survive beneath them, the gestures so quiet they are almost invisible. You begin to notice them only when the world slows enough to see. It begins with the sound of church bells. Faint, hesitant. You follow them through the haze towards St. Clement Danes. The doors are open, light spilling onto the snow. Inside, candles tremble in the draught. The pews are half full. Beggars beside clerks, widows beside soldiers, all hunched in their coats. The vicar's voice is hoarse. He speaks not of sin, but of soup. There is broth in the vestry after service, he says. No questions, no names. You smell it before you see it. Onions, barley, a hint of bone. The line forms quietly, tin cups clinking. When it's your turn, the warmth fogs your glasses. The first sip feels like forgiveness. Historians will later call these charity kitchens precursors to the modern relief stations. By the end of the 1840s, more than 60 operate across London, many run by women who once knew hunger themselves. They feed thousands each week. Some write their donors' names in ledgers. Others pray instead. None of them ask where you've come from. Hunger makes all stories the same. Outside, a group of boys build a fire in an iron bucket behind the churchyard wall. They pass around a heel of bread, tearing it into equal pieces. Fair shares, the eldest says, though he keeps the smallest bit for himself. You watch them eat, faces ruddy in the glow. One holds his hands over the flame, fingers spread like wings. It looks almost holy. You walk south toward the river. The frost has thickened again, turning the cobbles to glass. A ragman pushes a cart stacked with broken furniture. "Firewood," he calls. "A penny the plank." An old woman stops him, searching her pockets. She hasn't enough. He shrugs, then tosses a board onto her doorstep. "The Lord'll pay me later." She smiles with only half her teeth and whispers a blessing that fogs the air. He tips his hat and moves on. There are other kindnesses. A cab driver, seeing a beggar collapsed by the curb, lifts him into the seat, drives him without fare to the nearest infirmary. A lamplighter shields a child from sleet with his coat until the constable comes. The ledger of mercy fills itself in moments like these, unrecorded and unpaid. The newspapers never print them. History forgets them, but they hold the city together more tightly than any bridge. You turn down a narrow lane off Bishopsgate. The smell of bread draws you toward a doorway where a baker works late. His shop is hot enough to make your eyes water. He sees you standing there, pale from the cold, and nods toward the counter. "End of day," he says, sliding a loaf across the boards. "It'll be hard by morning, but still food." You reach for coins. He waves you off. "We all freeze the same," he adds. The loaf is still warm. You carry it against your chest like a living thing. Later, you pass through Spitalfields Market, where the stalls stand empty under a thin drift of snow. In one corner, a woman ladles tea from a tin kettle into chipped mugs. The liquid is weak and grey, more warmth than flavour. She sells it for a farthing, but when a match girl shakes her head, she pours it anyway. Heat first, pay later. The girl drinks slowly, steam curling around her face. When she finishes, she says thank you as if it were the rarest word she knows. The churches open their crypts at night now. You find one beneath St. Giles, where rows of straw mats cover the stone floor. Men and women lie side by side, boots for pillows. The air smells of wax and damp wool. A priest moves between them, laying blankets, whispering, "Sleep, my friends." You lie down among them. Above, the organ pipes hum faintly in the wind, a lullaby written by mercy itself. Historians will say that these winter shelters began as experiments, a few parishes testing whether compassion could be efficient. It could. In that first season, the death toll on the streets fell by nearly a third. Still, there were arguments, pamphlets warning that kindness bred laziness, that charity encouraged the undeserving. But the ones who lit fires in church basements kept lighting them anyway. The poor could not afford politics. They dealt only in warmth. You wake before dawn to the sound of footsteps above. The caretaker opens the door, letting in a slice of icy air. One by one the sleepers rise, stretching stiff limbs, wrapping rags around their feet. A woman near you presses a crust of bread into another's hand. "For the road," she says. The gesture is small, but it feels enormous. Outside, the sky has turned silver. Frost coats every railing, every lamp-post. You walk toward Covent Garden, where stalls are just setting up. A costermonger gives you an apple spotted with bruises. "No charge," he says. "It's near rotten anyway." You bite it, the sweetness startling after weeks of smoke. You watch him arrange his fruit carefully, as if each orange and pear were a promise that colour will return some day. Further west, in Mayfair, even the rich have softened. The newspapers mention that several gentlemen have opened their stables to shelter the poor. One lady of fashion sends blankets by carriage to the East End, though she insists her name not be used. Charity, she tells a friend, is warmer when anonymous. Servants whisper that she keeps her own fire low out of guilt. You walk as the morning brightens. The fog thins enough to reveal faces, strangers passing, eyes meeting, nods exchanged. A man offers his arm to steady an old woman over the ice. Two apprentices haul a fallen horse upright while the owner weeps. The rhythm of help spreads like heat through metal. London is a furnace of small flames, each one kindled by someone who has almost nothing left to burn. At noon the bells ring again. This time the sound feels lighter. Children run along the pavement, kicking chunks of ice like stones. One boy stumbles, another lifts him, brushing off the snow. They grin, cheeks red, alive. Above them, smoke from thousands of chimneys twists upward, blue against the new sky. The worst of winter is not gone, but its grip has loosened. Historians, always counting, will never manage to total the number of lives saved by these unseen mercies. No ledger could hold them. They will speak, instead of economic recovery, of reforms, of parliamentary debates. But beneath those words lies this simpler truth. People kept one another alive because the alternative was unthinkable. You cross the bridge toward the south bank. The Thames flows again, sluggish but free, carrying shards of ice out to sea. You pause midway, hands resting on the cold iron rail. The wind cuts through your coat, but you hardly feel it. Below, a barge passes, its pilot raising a hand in greeting. You raise yours back. The gesture feels ancient, human, enough. As evening falls, lanterns bloom along the streets. Their light is softer tonight, less defiant, more at peace. You walk without hurry, watching figures in doorways. Faces turn toward one another, sharing a joke, a cup, a story. The frost still glitters on the stones, but it no longer looks cruel. It looks like memory, a reminder that warmth is something you make together. Somewhere a choir practices for Sunday service. The voices rise through the mist, thin but clear. You stop and listen until the final note fades. For a moment the city holds its breath, balanced between cold and comfort. Then someone laughs, and the sound ripples outward, a tiny wave of life. You smile into the fog, knowing that London will survive not because of its walls or its wealth, but because of this, the stubborn kindness that refuses to freeze. It happens almost without warning. One morning you wake and the world sounds different. Not silent, not muffled, but alive again. The air outside your window drips instead of cracks. Somewhere a gutter sings. You rise and the floorboards no longer bite. When you open the door, a smell greets you that you've almost forgotten. Earth, damp, unburned, forgiving earth. The frost is loosening. Puddles bloom across the cobblestones where ice once ruled. The fog has thinned to a pale veil that curls and breaks in the wind. The sky is not blue yet, but it tries. You hear a wagon creak, the rhythm of hooves returning to proper pace. People walk faster now, their shoulders lifted as though the city itself has exhaled. The newspapers call it a thaw. They print numbers, temperatures, river levels, the count of dead, but none of them explain the sound. It's the noise of a city waking, doors unbolting, shutters thrown open, the crack of wood bending back into life. In alleys where you once saw fires in tin buckets, water now runs down the stones, washing soot into the drains. London smells of rust and resurrection. You make your way toward the Thames. The ice is breaking there, slabs drifting downstream, colliding with a noise like distant cannon fire. Crowds gather along the banks, watching the river move again. Some cheer, others weep. The current carries away more than debris. It takes the silence with it. Barges rock impatiently against their ropes. Seagulls return, their cries sharp against the air. Historians will later note the flood that followed, piers torn loose, wharves crushed, cellars drowned. But those who stood here remember only the motion. After weeks of stillness, Even destruction feels holy. On London Bridge you meet the coal bargemen, faces split with blackened grins. We'll sail again by week's end, one tells you, tapping the railing. Never thought I'd miss the stink of the river. His laughter rolls across the water, mixing with the groan of ice and rope. The frost's empire has ended. Trade is its herald. You walk through the city, and everywhere the thaw writes its own scripture. Icicles melt from eaves, dripping onto hats and bonnets. Children dart out to catch the drops on their tongues. The pavement steams where sunlight touches it. You pass the baker's shop. The window is clear now, no longer laced with frost, and the smell of bread spills freely into the street. The door stands open, and a sign in the glass reads, "Hot loaves again." At the market, vendors return like migrating birds. Their cries overlap. Fish fresh today, cabbages for a penny, coal cheap again. The world sounds like noise after too much silence, glorious and rough. A woman laughs as a cart splashes through a puddle and drenches her skirts. She wipes her face, still laughing. For the first time in months, London smells faintly of rain instead of smoke. But not everything revives so easily. You turn a corner and see the scars winter has left. A wall collapsed under the thaw, revealing rooms behind it. Beds of straw, empty hearths, a child's shoe half buried in ash. Men shovel debris while women pick through for salvage. Won't build here again, one says, voice flat. Ground's cursed. Yet even as she speaks, another woman hangs washed sheets from the remaining beams, white flags of surrender and survival. At the workhouse, the gates are open. The porter leans on his broom, coat undone, smiling at nothing in particular. The yard is mud instead of ice. Women carry baskets of clean linen into the sunlight, spreading it on lines to dry. The air smells faintly of soap and thawed stone. A matron scolds two boys for playing in puddles, but her voice lacks conviction. Even she looks lighter, like a statue beginning to move. You cross into Spitalfields. The flower sellers have returned, though their baskets hold only evergreen sprigs and the first snowdrops from the south. Spring's coming early, they say. One tells you, though, her hands are still cracked and red. She ties a single snowdrop to a child's coat button. For luck, she says. For warmer days. The child grins, gap-toothed and shy. The small white flower trembles in the wind but does not fall. In Whitechapel, the factories exhale smoke again. Chimneys roar, carts rattle, whistles shriek. The noise feels almost cruel after the hush of frost. But it is the sound of wages returning, of meals earned instead of begged. Men shout to one another across yards slick with meltwater. A foreman yells, "Back to it, lads!" And the cheer that follows is genuine. Hard work is better than no work at all. Yet beneath the bustle runs something quieter, a shared knowledge of what they've endured. You see it in the way strangers pause to greet one another, in the coins dropped discreetly into beggars' hands, in the long, tired looks traded between neighbours who once shared a single fire. No one speaks of heroism. They simply go on because going on is all that's left. The thaw uncovers more than stone. Along the riverbank, the ice yields its dead, animals, barrels, even a human form or two. The city buries them without fanfare. The newspapers call it a small toll for a severe season. But those who find them pause, whispering short prayers, leaving flowers where they can. You stop at one such spot, a handful of wildflowers frozen upright beside a broken railing, and bow your head. The air smells of iron and salt. By afternoon, sunlight spreads fully, for the first time in weeks. It glances off wet roofs, turns puddles to mirrors. You catch your own reflection and barely recognize it. Face leaner, eyes darker, but alive. Around you the city gleams as if newly made. The thaw has revealed both its ugliness and its strength. Soot streaks the walls, frost-burned paint peels away. But beneath the grime there is colour again. The stubborn red of brick, the soft brown of thawed wood. Historians will later write that the Great Frost of the 1840s cost thousands of lives, yet in its wake came reform, cleaner air laws, new charities, small steps toward compassion. They will quote statistics, publish graphs, and move on to the next century. But the people who lived it will remember something else. The sound of dripping water after endless silence, the first smell of thawing soil, the taste of bread still warm, shared without asking. As evening descends, you find yourself once more by the river. It flows now, slow but certain. Lanterns reflect on its surface like liquid fire. The ice drifts past, slabs glowing amber beneath the lamps, fragments of winter carried toward the sea. A ferryman hums as he works, his tune half lost in the wind. You recognize it, an old lullaby you've heard from women and children all winter long. Its melody feels older than memory. You lean against the railing and let the wind wash over you. The air smells of wet metal, but also of something sweeter, promise. The city behind you murmurs carts, voices, dogs, church bells far away. The chorus of life resuming. You think of the match girl, the laundress, the boy on the ice, the woman by the fire, all those faces carried within this frozen season. You wonder where they are now. Perhaps asleep, perhaps still working, perhaps standing, as you are, at the edge of the water, watching the ice drift away. The bells begin to ring, slow, measured, certain. For once, they sound not like warning but release. You breathe in, feeling the weight of the cold slide off your ribs. The frost has loosened, yes, but not erased. Its memory will linger in every cough, every chimney stain, every story told beside the next winter's fire. Yet life moves forward, as rivers do, as cities must. You turn from the water and start home through streets that glisten under lamplight. The snowmelt ripples around your boots, and each step feels lighter. London's heart beats again. Wet, smoky, imperfect, human. Behind you, the river whispers its eternal refrain, still flowing, still alive. Now the story softens. The river quiets, the fog thins, and London drifts far behind you. The clatter of carts fades first, then the bells, then even the whisper of your own footsteps. You are still walking, but the ground has changed beneath you. No longer cobblestone or ice, only something smooth, cool, endless. The air tastes clean again. You breathe out slowly. Each breath feels lighter than the last. The cold releases its hold on your shoulders, sliding away like a heavy coat. In its place comes warmth, not sudden but steady, a slow unfurling that moves through your hands, your chest, your throat. You can almost hear it. The quiet crackle of thaw, the sound of a hearth waiting inside you. Somewhere, water drips from an eave. Somewhere else, a fire murmurs, gentle and sure. These sounds braid together until they become a rhythm. Heartbeat, rainfall, breath. The city that once pressed close, now lies distant and small, a dim constellation of lights below a grey horizon. The fog lifts, and you can see stars at last, faint and trembling. They look like tiny candles floating above the world you've just left. You remember faces, the woman by the fire, the child with matches, the mother folding linen in a washhouse. They blur now, softened by warmth and time. You wish them rest. You wish the whole city rest. Every cough quiets, every window glows, every hand finds another hand to hold. Breathe again. You sit safe now. The frost cannot reach you here. The air is mild, the bed beneath you steady. Let the noise of the past sink away. The bells, the shovels, the whispering fog. What remains is only stillness. Wide and deep, you close your eyes. The warmth rises, the heartbeat slows. The last of the winter drifts away, like smoke. Sweet dreams.